I'm Chen, 31 years old, and for most of my life, I believed that love meant sacrifice. Growing up as the eldest daughter in a traditional Chinese-American household in San Francisco, I learned early that my worth was measured by how much I could give to others, how many expectations I could fulfill, and how seamlessly I could disappear my own needs to accommodate everyone else's. My parents, David and Linda Chen, immigrated from Taiwan in the 1980s with nothing but determination and dreams of building a better life for their future children. They worked tirelessly to establish their small import business, often 16-hour days, 7 days a week. By the time I was born, followed by my younger brother Kevin 2 years later, they had achieved a modest middle-class life. But the stress and pressure of their journey had left deep marks on how they viewed success, family obligations, and what it meant to be a good daughter. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders before I even understood what responsibility meant. At age 5, I was already translating simple conversations between my parents and their English-speaking customers, standing on a small wooden stool behind the counter of Chen Imports, carefully enunciating words I had learned from Sesame Street and elementary school. My parents praised my linguistic abilities with a mixture of pride and relief that bordered on desperation. "Maya is so smart," my mother would tell customers, her hand resting protectively on my shoulder. "She helps Mama and Baba understand everything." What felt like praise at 5 became an invisible cage by 8. I accompanied my parents to every important appointment, from parent-teacher conferences where I translated my own academic performance to bank meetings where I explained loan terms I barely comprehended myself. While other children complained about being dragged to boring adult errands, I had become an essential component of those errands, a living bridge between my parents' determination and the English-speaking world they were still learning to navigate. Kevin, meanwhile, lived in a different universe entirely. 2 years younger and blessed with an intuitive understanding of computers that amazed even his teachers, he was designated as the family's future tech genius from the moment he wrote his first simple program at age 10. My parents spoke about Kevin's potential with the reverence usually reserved for discussing lottery tickets or divine intervention. "Kevin will work for big computer company," my father would tell friends and relatives, his chest swelling with pride. "Maybe start his own business someday, like Bill Gates." The differential treatment became more pronounced as we entered our teenage years. Kevin's bedroom was transformed into a high-tech sanctuary, complete with the latest computer equipment, programming books, and educational software that my parents purchased despite our modest family budget. My room remained essentially unchanged from childhood, decorated with faded posters and furnished with hand-me-down furniture that had seen better decades. When Kevin struggled with algebra in 9th grade, my parents hired a private tutor and rearranged their work schedules to ensure he received the academic support he needed. When I expressed difficulty with advanced chemistry the following year, my mother's advice was practical and dismissive. "You don't need chemistry for business. Focus on subjects that will help the family company." High school intensified these patterns in ways that shaped my understanding of my own value and purpose. While Kevin joined the robotics club, participated in coding competitions, and spent weekends at computer camps funded by my parents' savings, I worked at Chen Imports every Friday evening and all day Saturday. The work wasn't optional or even presented as a choice. It was simply expected, the way breathing was expected, the way showing up to school was expected. My Friday evenings were spent in the warehouse section of our family business, organizing inventory, processing shipping documents, and learning the intricate details of import regulations and customer service. While my classmates went to football games, school dances, and sleepovers, I became intimately familiar with customs forms, freight schedules, and the particular challenges of sourcing products from manufacturers across Southeast Asia. The work itself wasn't inherently unpleasant. I developed a genuine appreciation for the complexity of international trade and discovered that I had a natural aptitude for organization and problem-solving. What gradually wore me down was the invisible nature of my contributions and the stark contrast between how my work was perceived versus how Kevin's academic achievements were celebrated. When Kevin won a regional programming competition in his junior year, our extended family received phone calls, a celebration dinner was organized, and the local Chinese-language newspaper ran a small feature story about the young computer genius from the Chen family. when I successfully negotiated a significant cost reduction with one of our major suppliers, saving the family business thousands of dollars annually. The accomplishment was acknowledged with a brief, "good job," at dinner and an expectation that such successes were simply part of my normal responsibilities. My academic performance remained strong despite my work obligations, but my extracurricular opportunities were limited by my family commitments. I wanted to join the school newspaper, having discovered a passion for writing during my English classes, but the newspaper meetings conflicted with my Friday work schedule. When I approached my parents about adjusting my work hours to accommodate the activity, their response was immediate and non-negotiable. "Newspaper writing doesn't help the family business," my father explained with the patience of someone stating an obvious fact. "You can write anytime. Learning business skills now will help your future and our future." The assumption embedded in his statement was clear. My future was inextricably linked to the family business in a way that Kevin's future was not. Kevin was being groomed to soar beyond the family's current circumstances, while I was being trained to perpetuate and manage those circumstances. Senior year brought the college application process, which revealed the full extent of these different expectations. Kevin applied to prestigious universities across the country, focusing on computer science programs that would position him for careers in Silicon Valley's most innovative companies. His applications were supported by impressive test scores, strong recommendation letters from his programming mentors, and a portfolio of coding projects that demonstrated genuine technical talent. My college aspirations were more modest, but equally passionate. I had fallen in love with creative writing and journalism, spending my limited free time crafting short stories and essays that my English teachers praised for their emotional depth and technical skill. I dreamed of studying creative writing at UC Berkeley, maybe pursuing a career in journalism or publishing, industries that fascinated me with their combination of storytelling and real-world impact. When I mentioned these aspirations during a family dinner in the fall of my senior year, the response was swift and decisive. My mother set down her chopsticks and looked at me with the expression she typically reserved for explaining why I couldn't have expensive clothes or unnecessary luxuries. "Writing doesn't pay the bills, Maya," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Look at your English teacher. How much money does she make? How can she support a family? You're smart, responsible. Business administration will give you practical skills, help you manage the family company properly." My father nodded in agreement, adding his own perspective with the certainty of someone who had built a successful business from nothing. "Creative writing is a hobby, not a career. We've seen how hard it is to make money in America. You need skills that guarantee employment, guarantee security." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with my parents presenting logical arguments about financial stability, family obligations, and the practical benefits of business education. They weren't cruel or dismissive. They genuinely believed they were protecting me from the financial struggles and uncertainty they had experienced as immigrants building a life in a foreign country. But their logic was built on an assumption they never stated explicitly, that my role in life was to be practical, responsible, and safe, while Kevin's role was to be innovative, ambitious, and potentially extraordinary. They were preparing me to manage their legacy while preparing him to transcend it. So I dutifully enrolled in business administration courses at San Francisco State University, watching my creative writing dreams fade into the background of practical considerations and family expectations. The major wasn't uninteresting, and I discovered aptitudes for marketing and organizational management that would serve me well in later years. But every literature class I took as an elective reminded me of the path I wasn't taking, the stories I wasn't writing, the creative identity I was systematically suppressing in favor of family harmony. College brought little relief from family obligations. While Kevin received full financial support for his computer science degree at Stanford, including housing, textbooks, spending money, and even a used car to facilitate his commute, I was expected to work part-time to contribute to my own education costs. The arrangement was presented as a natural consequence of our different academic trajectories. "Kevin's program is very demanding," my father explained when I questioned the disparity in financial support. "He needs to focus completely on his studies to compete with other students. You're studying business, which is more practical, easier to balance with work. And besides, you're more responsible with money. Kevin would probably spend it on computer games and electronics." The message was unmistakable but never explicitly stated. Kevin's education was an investment in his individual potential, while my education was an extension of my existing family responsibilities. He was being prepared to launch into his own stratosphere of success, while I was being trained to be a more effective steward of the family's current achievements. My part-time job was, predictably, at Chen Imports, where my responsibilities expanded significantly as my parents began to view my business education as preparation for eventually taking over day-to-day operations. I worked 20 hours per week during the school year and full-time during summer breaks, learning every aspect of the import business from inventory management to customer relations to financial planning. The work provided practical experience that complemented my academic studies, and I genuinely enjoyed many aspects of the business operations. I had inherited my parents' aptitude for detail-oriented work and discovered that I had natural skills in customer service and problem-solving. Over the 4 years of my undergraduate education, I gradually became indispensable to the smooth functioning of Chen Imports, handling responsibilities that would typically require a full-time manager. Meanwhile, Kevin thrived in the intellectual atmosphere of Stanford, surrounded by other brilliant students and professors who encouraged his most ambitious technological dreams. His summer breaks were spent at internships with major tech companies, gaining experience and making connections that would prove invaluable when he eventually launched his own startup. While I spent my summers managing import logistics and customer complaints, Kevin was learning from the titans of Silicon Valley innovation. The family dynamics during this period reinforced patterns that had been developing since childhood. Kevin's academic achievements, internship opportunities, and future prospects dominated family conversations and celebrations. Every semester, his grades were discussed with pride and excitement. His professors' comments were shared with extended family members, and his post-graduation possibilities were analyzed with the intensity of military strategists planning a complex campaign. My academic performance, which remained strong despite my work obligations, was acknowledged but never celebrated. When I made Dean's List 3 consecutive semesters, the achievement was mentioned briefly at dinner and then forgotten. When Kevin received a single A+ in an advanced algorithms course, the grade became the centerpiece of conversation for weeks, with phone calls to relatives and proud announcements to family friends. The romantic aspect of my life during college suffered under the dual pressures of work obligations and family expectations. While Kevin dated freely, bringing girlfriends to family dinners, and receiving support for his social development, my relationships were scrutinized through the lens of how potential partners might affect my family commitments and future role in the business. Marcus, whom I dated for most of my junior year, was a journalism major with dreams of working for a major newspaper. He was intelligent, kind, and genuinely interested in my thoughts and ambitions beyond my family responsibilities. For the first time, I found myself in a relationship with someone who encouraged my suppressed creative interests and questioned why I had abandoned my writing aspirations. "You light up when you talk about storytelling," he observed one evening as we walked through Golden Gate Park after attending a poetry reading in the city. "I've never seen you show that kind of enthusiasm when you mention the family business. Why did you give up on writing?" His question forced me to articulate something I had been avoiding for years. I hadn't consciously given up on writing so much as I had gradually allowed family expectations to crowd out space for my own dreams. The realization was both liberating and deeply uncomfortable. When I brought Marcus to a family dinner midway through our relationship, the evening revealed the impossible position I occupied between my individual desires and family obligations. Marcus asked thoughtful questions about my parents' immigration experience and showed genuine interest in learning about the import business. But when the conversation turned to my future plans, the tension became unmistakable. "Maya will take over the business after graduation," my mother explained to Marcus with the confidence of someone stating an established fact. "She's been learning every aspect of the operations. Very responsible, very capable." Marcus glanced at me with surprise, clearly remembering our conversations about my interest in journalism and creative writing. "That's impressive," he said carefully. "Maya also has incredible writing talent. Have you read any of her stories?" The silence that followed was brief but telling. My parents had never read anything I had written beyond school assignments, having categorized creative writing as an impractical hobby rather than a potential career path. Marcus's question highlighted a fundamental disconnect between how my family saw me and how I saw myself. Writing is a nice hobby, my father replied diplomatically, but business skills provide security. Maya understands the importance of practical choices. The relationship with Marcus continued for several more months, but the family dinner had revealed an unbridgeable gap between my family's expectations and the encouragement I received from someone who knew me as an individual rather than as a family role. Marcus respected my family commitments but couldn't understand why I was willing to abandon my creative passions entirely to fulfill obligations I had never consciously chosen. Our relationship ended not through any dramatic confrontation, but through the gradual erosion of possibilities. Marcus was offered an internship at a prestigious newspaper in Washington, D.C. for the summer, an opportunity that could launch his journalism career. I was expected to work full-time at Chen Imports, managing operations while my parents attended trade shows and supplier meetings in Asia. "Come with me," Marcus suggested during one of our last conversations as a couple. "Take a summer off from the family business. Explore what you actually want to do with your life." The suggestion was impossible for reasons I couldn't adequately explain to someone who hadn't grown up with the particular obligations of an immigrant family's eldest daughter. My absence during the summer would create genuine hardship for my parents, who depended on my bilingual skills and business knowledge to maintain operations while they focused on expanding supplier relationships. But more than practical considerations, Marcus's suggestion revealed how completely I had internalized the belief that my individual desires were secondary to family needs. The idea of choosing my own path over family obligations felt not just impractical, but fundamentally selfish, a betrayal of the sacrifices my parents had made to provide opportunities for their children. So Marcus went to Washington, and I spent the summer managing Chen Imports, gradually taking on more senior responsibilities as my parents recognized my competence and reliability. By the time I graduated with my business administration degree, I had essentially become the company's operations manager, handling everything from supplier negotiations to customer service to financial planning. After graduation, the transition to full-time employment at Chen Imports felt inevitable rather than chosen. My parents offered me a management position with a modest salary and the promise of eventual ownership, framing the opportunity as a natural progression of my education and experience. Kevin, meanwhile, graduated from Stanford with multiple job offers from major tech companies and venture capital funding for a startup idea he had developed in his senior year. The family celebration for Kevin's graduation was elaborate and emotional, with relatives traveling from across the country to honor his achievements and future prospects. My graduation was acknowledged with a dinner at a nice restaurant and congratulations on securing a stable career with the family business. The difference in recognition reflected the family's different expectations for our respective futures. Kevin was launching into unlimited possibility, while I was settling into predetermined responsibility. The first few years of my post-graduation life established patterns that would define the next decade of my existence. Kevin's startup, a software security company called SecureLogic, attracted significant venture capital investment and rapidly expanded from a 3-person operation to a mid-sized company with dozens of employees. His success was celebrated at every family gathering, with my parents proudly sharing updates about his latest business achievements and technology innovations. Meanwhile, I managed the day-to-day operations of Chen Imports with increasing competence and decreasing enthusiasm. The work itself wasn't unpleasant, and I took genuine pride in the improvements I implemented, streamlining inventory systems, expanding the customer base, and increasing profit margins through more efficient supplier relationships. But every success felt like further evidence of my capability to fulfill family expectations rather than progress toward my own aspirations. The financial arrangement reinforced my role as family supporter rather than individual achiever. While Kevin's startup loan had been structured as a formal business investment with the expectation of eventual repayment, my compensation at Chen Imports remained modest despite my expanding responsibilities. When I requested salary increases that would reflect my contributions and allow me to achieve financial independence, my parents expressed hurt and confusion. "We're family," my mother said during one such conversation, her voice heavy with disappointment. "You don't charge family for love and loyalty. Everything we build together." Kevin's success is family success. Your success is family success. Why do you think in terms of individual money? The logic was circular and inescapable. Family success was measured by Kevin's individual achievements and wealth accumulation, but my individual compensation was subordinated to the collective good of maintaining family business operations. I was expected to sacrifice personal financial goals for family stability while celebrating Kevin's personal financial achievements as family victories. This dynamic became more painful as Kevin's wealth increased dramatically. SecureLogic's rapid growth attracted acquisition interest from major technology corporations, and by his late 20s, Kevin had become a multi-millionaire through stock options and equity sales. He purchased a beautiful house in Palo Alto, complete with a home office, gourmet kitchen, and landscaped garden that reflected his success and sophisticated tastes. Meanwhile, I lived in a modest studio apartment in San Francisco, carefully budgeting every expense to make ends meet on my family business salary. The contrast wasn't lost on extended family members, who began to make subtle comments about my financial situation relative to Kevin's obvious prosperity. At family gatherings, conversations naturally gravitated toward Kevin's latest business ventures and property investments, while my contributions to maintaining the family import business were taken for granted as background logistics. The romantic challenges of my life intensified during this period as potential partners struggled to understand my complex relationship with family obligations. David, a marketing executive whom I dated for 2 years in my late 20s, initially found my family loyalty admirable and my business acumen impressive. But as our relationship deepened, he became increasingly frustrated with what he perceived as my inability to prioritize our future together over my family's immediate needs. "You're never really present," he said during a conversation that I knew was leading toward our eventual breakup. "Even when you're physically here, part of you is always worried about what your family needs, what crisis needs managing, what responsibility you're neglecting. I feel like I'm dating a committee, not a person." His words stung because they were accurate. I had become so accustomed to being available for family emergencies, business crises, and ongoing operational needs that I had lost the ability to fully disconnect from those responsibilities even during personal time. Vacations were interrupted by supplier problems that required my bilingual skills to resolve. Romantic dinners were cut short by urgent calls about shipping delays or customer complaints. The relationship with David ended when I canceled our planned vacation to Europe to handle a major crisis at Chen Imports. A shipping container full of seasonal merchandise had been delayed due to customs complications, threatening to miss the crucial pre-holiday sales period. My parents were attending a trade show in Hong Kong and needed me to coordinate with freight forwarders, customs brokers, and customers to minimize the business impact. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," David said when I explained why I couldn't travel. "Your family treats you like an unpaid emergency response team, and you accept it because you think that's what love looks like. But Maya, healthy relationships have boundaries. Family or romantic." After David, I largely stopped dating seriously, telling myself that I was focusing on career development and personal growth. In reality, I had begun to believe that my family obligations made me unsuitable for romantic partnerships with people who hadn't grown up understanding the particular pressures of immigrant family dynamics and intergenerational responsibility. Work became my refuge and my identity, the one area of my life where I felt competent and valuable. I threw myself into improving Chen Imports operations, implementing new technology systems, expanding into online sales, and developing marketing strategies that significantly increased the company's profitability. My efforts were successful but invisible, acknowledged by my parents as natural extensions of my role rather than exceptional achievements worthy of recognition or additional compensation. The isolation of my situation became more apparent as I watched friends from college develop their own careers, relationships, and independent adult lives. While they advanced in their chosen fields, accumulated savings, and made autonomous decisions about their futures, I remained tethered to family obligations that seemed to expand rather than diminish as I proved my competence and reliability. Social gatherings with former classmates became increasingly uncomfortable as conversations naturally turned to career achievements, relationship milestones, and future plans. I found myself explaining my situation in ways that sounded defensive even to my own ears, describing the family business as an opportunity rather than an obligation, emphasizing the security and tradition of working with family rather than acknowledging the personal costs of my choices. Jennifer, my roommate from freshman year, had become a successful architect, designing residential projects across the Bay Area and building a reputation for innovative, sustainable design. When we met for coffee to catch up, her enthusiasm for her work highlighted everything I felt was missing from my own professional life. "I love that every project is different," she said, showing me photos of a house she had designed in Marin County. "Yesterday, I was solving structural problems. Today, I'm selecting materials. Tomorrow, I'm presenting to clients. It never gets boring, and I can see the direct impact of my creativity and problem-solving skills." Her description of professional fulfillment contrasted sharply with my experience of handling the same types of business challenges year after year, solving similar problems with similar solutions, feeling competent but not creative, useful but not inspired. "What about you?" Jennifer asked. "Are you happy running the family business? It seems like a lot of responsibility." The question forced me to articulate something I had been avoiding for years. I wasn't happy, but I also wasn't unhappy in any way that felt legitimate or actionable. I was competent, successful, and fulfilling important family obligations. My dissatisfaction felt selfish, ungrateful, and potentially destructive to relationships I valued. "It's complicated," I finally replied, a response that had become my standard deflection when people asked about my career satisfaction. Family businesses have unique challenges and rewards. The conversation with Jennifer planted seeds of discontent that grew stronger over the following months. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to think seriously about what my life might look like if I made decisions based on my own interests and aspirations rather than family expectations and obligations. The thought experiment was both exhilarating and terrifying. What would I do if I could start over professionally? What kind of work would energize me the way architecture energized Jennifer? What dreams had I abandoned so completely that I could barely remember them? Late at night, in the privacy of my studio apartment, I began writing again for the first time since college. Initially, I told myself it was just a stress relief activity, a way to process the complex emotions I felt about my family situation and career trajectory. But as weeks turned into months, I realized that writing provided a sense of creative fulfillment and personal expression that had been completely absent from my professional life. The stories I wrote during this period were deeply personal, exploring themes of family obligation, cultural identity, and the tension between individual desires and collective responsibility. Through fiction, I could examine experiences and emotions that felt too dangerous to address directly in my real life. Writing became a secret identity, a part of myself that existed independently of family expectations and business responsibilities. I also began reading extensively, consuming novels, memoirs, and essays that helped me understand my experience in broader contexts. Books by other Asian American writers revealed that my struggles with family expectations and cultural identity were shared experiences rather than personal failures. Literature about women navigating career and family pressures provided language for feelings I had never been able to articulate. Amy Tan's The Joy Luck Club affected me particularly deeply, with its exploration of mother-daughter relationships across cultural and generational divides. The novel helped me understand that my parents' expectations were shaped by their own experiences of struggle and sacrifice, but that understanding their motivations didn't obligate me to fulfill their visions for my life indefinitely. As my secret writing life developed, I began to feel like I was living a double existence. During the day, I was Maya, the responsible daughter, the competent business manager, the reliable family member who could be counted on to handle any crisis or challenge. During the evening and weekend hours, I was someone else entirely, a creative person with opinions, dreams, and aspirations that existed independently of my family role. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening in March, exactly 1 week before my 31st birthday. I had spent the entire day dealing with a shipping crisis that threatened to delay a major order for one of our biggest clients. A container full of seasonal merchandise had been held up at customs due to documentation errors, threatening to miss the crucial spring sales period and potentially costing the company tens of thousands of dollars in lost revenue and customer dissatisfaction. The crisis required everything I had learned about international trade regulations, customer service, and crisis management. I spent 12 hours coordinating with suppliers in Southeast Asia, customs brokers at the Port of Oakland, freight forwarders across the Pacific, and increasingly anxious customers who needed their merchandise to arrive on schedule. The work involved complex problem-solving, multilingual communication, and the kind of high-pressure decision-making that would have challenged any business professional. By 6 p.m, I had successfully resolved the crisis through a combination of expedited shipping arrangements, customs documentation corrections, and customer service diplomacy that preserved important business relationships while minimizing financial losses. The solution saved Chen Imports approximately $30,000 in potential penalties, lost sales, and damaged customer relationships. Exhausted but relieved, I arrived at my parents' house for our weekly family dinner, expecting perhaps some acknowledgement of the day's crisis management and successful resolution. The work had required skills and experience that my parents deeply valued, and I had demonstrated exactly the kind of competence and reliability they had always praised in my professional performance. Instead, I walked into a celebration that had nothing to do with me or my achievements. Kevin had just announced that SecureLogic had been acquired by a major technology corporation for $45 million, a sale that would establish him as one of the youngest self-made multimillionaires in Silicon Valley. The dining room was filled with champagne, congratulations, and excited planning for how Kevin might invest his newfound wealth. Maya, my mother called out as I stood in the doorway, still wearing my work clothes and carrying my laptop bag heavy with the day's crisis documentation. Perfect timing. Kevin has wonderful news. His company sold for $45 million. Can you believe it? Our son is a multimillionaire. I mustered a smile and congratulated Kevin, genuinely happy for his success despite the exhaustion weighing down my bones and the surreal contrast between my invisible achievement and his celebrated triumph. We sat down for dinner, and the conversation revolved entirely around Kevin's accomplishment, his future investment plans, and the family's pride in his extraordinary success. Not once during the evening did anyone ask about my day, notice my fatigue, or inquire about the business crisis I had been managing. The $30,000 I had saved the family company that morning was invisible compared to the $45 million Kevin had earned through his stock sale. My competence was expected and unremarkable. His success was exceptional and worthy of celebration. The conversation at dinner revealed assumptions about our respective roles that had never been explicitly stated but had shaped our family dynamics for decades. Kevin's achievement was discussed as a personal triumph that brought honor to the entire family, while my professional responsibilities were considered normal family obligations that didn't merit special recognition or celebration. Halfway through dinner, as Kevin described his plans to purchase a vacation home in Lake Tahoe and invest in other technology startups, my father turned to me with an expression of paternal concern mixed with business opportunity. Maya, since Kevin's doing so well now, we've been thinking it's time to expand the family business, he said, his voice carrying the tone of someone presenting an exciting opportunity rather than additional obligation. We want to open a second location in Los Angeles, and we need someone we trust to manage it. It would mean relocating, of course, and the first year would be financially tight while we establish the new market. But think of the growth potential. The room fell silent as everyone looked at me expectantly. The irony was suffocating. Kevin was celebrating a $45 million windfall that would secure his financial freedom for life, while I was being asked to uproot my life, move to a new city, and work for minimal compensation to expand a business that had already consumed my entire adult life without providing equivalent rewards. The request embodied everything problematic about my family role. Kevin's success was treated as an individual achievement that enhanced the family's collective status, while my professional future was automatically subordinated to the family business's expansion needs. His wealth was his own to invest and enjoy, while my labor was considered a family resource to be deployed wherever it would benefit the collective enterprise. I need some time to think about it, I said carefully, my voice steadier than I felt inside, though my heart was racing with a combination of anger and desperate sadness. My mother's expression immediately shifted to disappointment mixed with confusion, as if my request for thinking time was inherently unreasonable and potentially hurtful to family harmony. "What's to think about?" she asked, her tone suggesting that my hesitation was evidence of selfishness or ingratitude. "This is a wonderful opportunity for the family. Kevin's success proves that hard work and sacrifice pay off. Now it's time for the business to grow, and you're the only one we trust to make it happen." But Kevin's success came from pursuing his own dreams, I pointed out, surprising myself with the directness of my response and the clarity of my thinking despite the emotional turbulence I felt. He followed his passion, received family support, and built something of his own. "I've been managing your dreams for 7 years." The silence that followed was deafening. Kevin shifted uncomfortably in his chair, suddenly finding his champagne glass extremely interesting and avoiding eye contact with anyone at the table. My father's jaw tightened in the way it did when he felt disrespected or questioned, a facial expression I had learned to recognize and avoid throughout my childhood and young adulthood. "Everything we've built for the family," my mother said, her voice rising slightly with hurt and defensiveness. "Your brother's success is family success. The business's success is family success. Since when do you think in terms of yours and mine instead of ours?" That question hung in the air like smoke, toxic and suffocating, forcing me to confront assumptions I had accepted without examination for my entire adult life. Since when, indeed? Since when had I started to notice that family success somehow always seemed to benefit everyone except me? Since when had I begun to realize that my sacrifices were expected and invisible while Kevin's achievements were celebrated and rewarded? Since when had I started to question whether love required the complete subordination of my individual identity to collective family needs? Since when had I begun to wonder whether my parents' pride in my responsibility and reliability was actually pride in my compliance and self-sacrifice? I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to process the rage and hurt bubbling up inside my chest like a pressure cooker reaching dangerous levels. Standing in front of the mirror in my childhood home's guest bathroom, surrounded by the same floral wallpaper and ceramic fixtures I had known since elementary school, I looked at my reflection and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had I become so tired? When had the light in my eyes dimmed to this resigned acceptance of circumstances I had never consciously chosen? When had I stopped believing that I deserved to pursue my own happiness with the same family support and encouragement that Kevin had always received? The face in the mirror belonged to someone who had spent so many years managing other people's needs and expectations that she had lost touch with her own desires and dreams. I saw a competent, responsible woman who had become invisible to herself, someone who had developed impressive professional skills, but had forgotten how to imagine a future based on her own aspirations rather than inherited obligations. The conversation continued when I returned to the table, but I found myself observing it as if from outside my own body, watching a family dynamic that suddenly seemed foreign and disturbing rather than natural and inevitable. My parents discussed logistics for the Los Angeles expansion. Kevin offered to invest some of his windfall in the new location, and everyone assumed that I would naturally accept this new level of sacrifice because that's what Maya did. Maya managed things. Maya sacrificed. Maya made sure everyone else's dreams came true. But sitting there, listening to my family plan my future without really asking what I wanted or considering what I might be giving up, something fundamental shifted inside me like tectonic plates moving deep beneath the Earth's surface. For the first time in my adult life, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of resentment that I had been suppressing for years, and the emotion was overwhelming in its intensity and clarity. I was angry, furious, actually, not just at my family, but at myself for allowing this dynamic to continue for so long, for participating in my own diminishment, for accepting the role of family supporter without ever questioning whether that role was fair, sustainable, or ultimately beneficial for anyone involved. The drive home that night was a revelation. Instead of the usual NPR news program that typically provided background noise for my commute, I drove in complete silence, finally allowing myself to think thoughts I had been pushing away for years. What did I actually want from my life? What dreams had I abandoned to fulfill everyone else's expectations? What would my life look like if I made decisions based on my own happiness instead of family obligation? By the time I reached my studio apartment, I had made a decision that terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. I was going to say no to the Los Angeles expansion. More than that, I was going to resign from the family business entirely and pursue the writing career I had abandoned a decade ago in favor of practical family expectations. The transformation wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but it was worth every difficult conversation, every moment of guilt, and every instance of learning to trust my own judgment. I am finally living my own life, and I am finally genuinely happy.